Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest. Riker, the Toronto Raptors pulled out a first-round commanding victory over the Orlando Magic, and now we have our real test, the Philadelphia 76ers, coming up in the second round.
And Ben, Paul Pierce, an infamous Raptors hater, and multiple other people that are always have the odds stacked against the Toronto Raptors, they are even on board with the Raptors having the edge in this series. I'm not entirely sure if the Raptors have an edge enough to be comfortable with moving on to the next round. I think this is going to be well fought, but let's get right into it, Ben, and break down. We'll do it in a more structured way. We'll break down the keys, maybe the 4 keys of the series for how the Raptors can get away with a couple victories against the 76ers. Then obviously, probably the most important thing, the key matchups, and that's going to be really the emphasis of the entire series. And then we'll just talk about predictions, etc. So start with what we think are probably the keys of the game. You got the number one, and you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, key one to this series is shutting down Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid has been an absolute monster for the 76ers, even though, he doesn't always play, isn't always healthy. When he's on the court, he's always a ferocious beast. In the playoffs in the first round, he averaged 25 points per game, 14 rebounds against the Nets. He's only played 4 games. He missed one of those games against Brooklyn, but when he's on the court, the Sixers are a different team, and we do have Marc Gasol on the roster now, who's a Defensive Player of the Year, has shown to be an absolute force on the defensive end, but, Joel Embiid, he's going to be a guy the Toronto Raptors have to stop if we want to be able to win this series.
And his health is going to be a big key for the 76ers trying to advance in this series. Obviously, he was very questionable in the Brooklyn matchup. But surprisingly, even though both teams, Raptors and the 76ers, advanced in the same amount of games, the Brooklyn Nets gave a lot of challenge and a lot of difficulty, except for one game against the 76ers. All the games were very close, despite the Brooklyn Nets not really having any superstars. D'Angelo Russell having a breakout season, and Karis LeVert playing pretty well. Spencer Dinwiddie is the same, but no big intimidating big man. Nobody that could really match up with Joel Embiid, and that was the reason Joel Embiid had to really come in and dominate the games that they won down the stretch. He had to do everything for them in order for them to just scrape by the Nets. So I think having the addition of a guy that not only with, like you said, the defensive capabilities of Marc Gasol, but the size to match up against Joel Embiid, I think that's in favor of the Toronto Raptors, despite Joel Embiid being one of the best scoring big men in the league right now.
Yeah, you're not going to stop him, but you want to be able to slow him down, force him to shoot more long-range jumpers. Even though he's capable of hitting them, the more Joel Embiid shoots the long twos or the threes, the better off the Toronto Raptors will be. But do you want to take it away with key 2 for the Toronto Raptors?
Key number 2, the man himself, our unanimous most improved player of the year, Spicy P, Pascal Siakam. He needs to continue to play. I have already dubbed him the most consistent player on the Toronto Raptors, with a significant amount of backlash from our commenters saying that should go to Kawhi Leonard. I think Kawhi Leonard is obviously going to be the superstar of this series, but Pascal Siakam, if he's able to go in and do the same things that he did against the Orlando Magic, then Paul Pierce and all the analysts, that's the reason that they have trust in the Raptors now. They're saying Kyle Lowry is the number 2 option. They don't have as much trust, but Pascal Siakam being able to do it at the next level, that's what makes the Raptors a next level team.
Yeah, that's for sure. I don't know if I agree with you on the consistency factor as Kawhi Leonard, when he's healthy, when he's not sick or dealing with a quad injury, a hamstring, whatever he deals with, he's obviously usually our best player, and he does it on a consistent night in, night out basis. But Pascal Siakam has established himself as the number 2 player for this roster, and during the playoff moments, he stepped up big time in round 1. Obviously, he had some monstrous nights against the Magic, ate up Jonathan Isaac and Aaron Gordon, whoever they tried to throw on him, so that wasn't an issue. But this is a much bigger test than the 76ers. He's probably going to be guarded by a little bit, I guess the Orlando Magic have some good defenders, but there's some high-profile names that he's going to go up against, and I think Pascal Siakam has to outperform guys like Tobias Harris, Jimmy Butler as the number 2 option, because, Pascal Siakam, as I mentioned, is our second star, and the Sixers are loaded with star power, so we need our best players to really continue what they've been doing throughout the playoffs, and Spicy P, in his first real run as a established star in the post, as for the Toronto Raptors, hopefully he continues to step up under pressure, and it's going to be interesting to see.
And it's very likely, Ben, that it could come down to Pascal Siakam having important shots down the stretch, because obviously Kawhi Leonard is going to be commanding so much defensive attention, right? Marc Gasol is going to be probably shut down by Joel Embiid. So we're going to have to look for offense from guys like Pascal Siakam if it comes down to a close game. Obviously, Kawhi Leonard is going to do his best to get his shots in, but I'd say if he's getting double teamed and Pascal's the number 2 guy, he's going to have the opportunity to step up big time. Third key...
Yeah, before we get to key 3, one more point on Pascal. Obviously, the Orlando Magic are a great defensive team, but they didn't really have a back-end enforcer like the Philadelphia 76ers do. Joel Embiid is established as one of the best shot blockers, one of the best rim protectors in the NBA, and most of Pascal Siakam's buckets come from around the rim. So having Joel Embiid in the paint to kind of guard that 5 to 10, 15 feet area, it's going to be interesting to see if Pascal can continue this play, or if he'll need to be able to shoot the 3 more often or shoot those mid-range jump shots that he usually doesn't take.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah, he might have to switch up his game in this series.
Yeah, and that could be devastating for him, or he could continue to impress us and surprise us with other ways of getting the ball in the bucket. But number 3, we can go with your number 3, and then I'll finish with the 4th key, I guess.
Yeah, certainly. Key 3 for this series for me is the bench. The Philadelphia 76ers, like the Toronto Raptors, are loaded in the starting lineup. They have Ben Simmons at point guard, JJ Redick at the 2, Jimmy Butler at the 3, Tobias Harris at the 4, Joel Embiid at the 5. Their whole starting lineup is guys that maybe aren't all-stars, but are fringe all-star caliber players. I guess JJ Redick isn't really an all-star, but he's a lights-out three-point shooter. So they have a lot of star power, but their bench has been their Achilles heel, so to speak. I know they have Boban, they have a few guys off the bench that can play, but the Toronto Raptors starting lineups, I think we can match up pretty solidly with that talented unit in Philadelphia, but the bench is where the Toronto Raptors can really set themselves apart from the Sixers. Fred VanVleet, he had an up and down first round series. I think he really needs to step up. Serge Ibaka, I know Boban is coming off the bench, but he needs to win that matchup. He's been a great center all year, in terms of getting he's been averaging about 15 and 10 for most of the season, so he's got to outperform Boban, who's probably been the best player off the Sixers bench in the playoffs, and got either Norman Powell, Patrick McCaw. We need that 8th man to play really well. Norman Powell, the last 2 games against the Orlando Magic, he was the X factor that really boosted the Toronto Raptors in those blowout wins. So these 3 guys off the bench are going to need to be key in order to have a solid series against the Philadelphia 76ers.
No, I absolutely 100% agree with that as well. The bench will play a significant portion of this game, and I expect that the 3 guys that you mentioned will probably get 20 to 25 minutes per game, and those need to be important, significant minutes. And there could be other guys that step up too. We could see a Patrick McCaw. We could see the return of OG Anunoby. I'm not entirely sure, but we'll talk about that all in a bit. Before we go too long, the final point, I was going to say limit runs, because that is a thing that the Raptors sometimes get down on, but you know what? Basketball is a game of runs, and I expect this matchup, this series, to be a lot closer throughout the games. I don't expect there to be, or I hope that there's not going to be big 20-point swings and huge leads. I hope that it's kind of close, unless the Raptors can actually keep their foot on the gas. I think instead, the 4th point, the final key to the Raptors' success is limiting Raptors killers, because if we can stop Joel Embiid and Kawhi Leonard can do his business on Ben Simmons, then that should be enough. I don't want to see the main guys of focus be shut down just for the likes of Jimmy Butler to step up and get 30 points per game, or Tobias Harris to come out and get 30 points per game. I think if the Raptors go out and do the defensive nitty-gritty against the big 2-headed dragon of the 76ers, their young core, I don't want them to then let the 3rd and 4th man up then take over the game.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's for sure. Their whole roster, as I already mentioned, they're so talented. Obviously, Joel Embiid is the head of the snake, but they have a lot of guys back, who can put up big numbers in the NBA. Riker, before we get into the matchups, one question I want to throw at you. Besides Joel Embiid, who are you most worried for on the Sixers? I guess that could segue into the matchups.
Well, I said it before. I think I don't like the Raptors killers. And the number 1 Raptor killer, we remember it, Jimmy Butler. And he had a decent series, I guess, against the Brooklyn Nets. Tobias Harris played really well against the Nets as well, but I think the defending matchups, we'll talk about that in a second, will be pretty good on him. I don't expect he'll be a big problem, but I could see the likes of Jimmy Butler stepping up, and then other players not being able to help out a lot on his drives and stuff, and I could see that being a problem.
Yeah, for sure. Jimmy Butler's a guy we're definitely going to need to contain. But let's just get straight into the matchups, because my ideal kind of, if I was Nick Nurse and I was game planning for the Sixers and I want to, finish the game with these sort of matchups, I'd put Kawhi Leonard on Ben Simmons. Because the way that Kawhi just completely negates what he does for the Sixers has been kind of crazy in all the games that we played against them this season. I'd throw Kawhi on Simmons, Danny Green on Jimmy Butler. I'd throw Kyle Lowry on JJ Redick so he can kind of he doesn't have to deal too much and can kind of slip into help side, get some charges. I'd throw Spicy P on Tobias Harris on the Sixers, and obviously Marc Gasol and Joel Embiid. Do you agree with that kind of tentative game plan from Ben Rogers if he was Coach Nurse?
Absolutely, and I think it could go either way. If you wanted to put Pascal Siakam on Ben Simmons, I think that could also work out pretty well, just in terms of sort of the size and the length matchup there. And also Ben Simmons is best in transition, and Pascal Siakam is obviously the transition god of the Toronto Raptors. Yeah. So if somehow the lineups needed to be shuffled around such that Danny Green needed to step up, for instance, to Tobias Harris, and then Kyle Lowry needed to be put somewhere, like on Jimmy Butler. Obviously, I can't see that happening, but if the lineups needed to be completely reshuffled, I would have trust in Siakam and also being competent enough to guard Ben Simmons. But the way you put it down, that's the way I expect it'll happen, and I think that's the most favorable matchup for the Toronto Raptors. I think that actually gives them the advantage on the defensive end against the 76ers.
Yep. Well, you brought up Jimmy Butler, and do you think Danny Green, he's established himself as one of the best defenders in the NBA. Do you think he'll be able to do a good job and kind of negate a lot of what Jimmy Butler does? Because Danny Green has shown for the Toronto Raptors he can lock down a lot of NBA players on the wing.
Yeah, well, my issue is not Danny Green being able to contain Jimmy Butler. My issue is, I alluded to it before, was any defender that's good is not going to completely stop a player from scoring. These players are so talented at the offensive level that once they're good enough to get 20 points per game, they're pretty well going to be able to get 20 points per game, right? Or somewhere around that. And Jimmy Butler is a guy, I don't expect him to score less than 14 a game, for instance. What I can see being a problem is if his driving becomes a bit of an issue just based off of ball movement, whatever have you. And Marc Gasol needs to step up to help, or Pascal Siakam, if he's guarding Tobias Harris down low, needs to step up to help. Then now you're exposing who's going to come in on the secondary help guarding Joel Embiid, right? Because now right, the switch is going to be a much smaller man. And that's what I see maybe being an issue, is not Danny Green or any individual defender not being able to stop their man, but switches and help side defense. I think that might be an issue that the Raptors definitely need to make sure that they control.
Yeah, certainly. Keeping the Sixers out of the driving lanes is going to be key. They have such great slashers. Ben Simmons, Jimmy Butler, they can all get to the rim. And, now that they have JJ Redick and Tobias Harris on the wings, they can kick it out to shooters. But I think an X factor in the series is Tobias Harris. He's kind of the forgotten player on the Sixers. Before he was traded to Philadelphia, he was looked at as a possible all-star this season. And, you mentioned he had a great series against the Brooklyn Nets. Pascal Siakam, or whoever gets switched on him, whether it be Kawhi, Pascal, Danny, whatever wing player ends up guarding him, really is going to have to make sure he doesn't get hot. Because I think the key for the Sixers is they have so many shooters, so many guys that need touches, so many guys that need the ball and are used to having the ball, right? So when they get their chance, when they get their opportunities, they need to be hounded defensively. So, they're not going to have the ball enough to where they can get into flow, get into a rhythm. We've seen it in the first series where Aaron Gordon got a lot of touches and he can really, knock down his shots. Now, the Magic didn't have nearly as much talent, but regardless, when you kind of guard, when you shut down the main people on the few possessions that they'll get cold, and just keeping these guys out of a rhythm. It goes to your point on negating runs. When teams go on runs, it kills the Toronto Raptors as, they just start hitting dumb shots, and no matter how good of defense you play, they're just not going to be stopped.
No, I definitely agree. But what we saw with the Nets series and the 76ers was that when Joel Embiid was not in the game, I'm saying Joel pretty quick, Joel obviously, when Joel Embiid is sitting on the bench and every other player is engaged in the game, this is a not very spectacular Brooklyn Nets team. This is a very improved Brooklyn Nets team and a very good young group of talented guys. Yeah. But this is not a spectacular Brooklyn Nets team that should really be able to match up with all the superstar talent that's on the 76ers. And yet with Joel Embiid sitting on the bench or, getting shut down on a few possessions, the game was in the favor of the Nets the whole time. So I'm not entirely worried about, Tobias Harris being able to go on a run or Jimmy Butler being able to go on a run, because two things that I saw was, one, that the chemistry wasn't really there like I thought it would be, and two, like you said, Aaron Gordon had a lot of time against the Raptors to make his offense work. When there's so many guys in the 76ers, each individual player doesn't have time to get out of a slump if they're in one, or to try different things on offense.
I 100% agree, and the Raptors need to make sure they don't get in that groove. That's a key. It harkens back to your point on runs, because they're so talented. If they get in that groove that we didn't really see in the Brooklyn Nets series, then it could be over for the team. As a team that talented is... They could make a run with the best of teams in the NBA, considering that talent.
Absolutely.
So we got to make sure they don't get the chemistry, don't get the groove, and the defense really has to be hounding on them when it comes to, whenever they get the touches. We can't let up for any... I think if we let a game go similar to game one, that's why I think game one in this series is so important. If we take away the confidence of the Philadelphia 76ers early, we don't let this talent get all the swagger and all that together, then I think it could be a pretty easy series for the Raptors. But if we give them a chance, if we give them an opportunity, we can make it a lot harder on ourselves than it has to be.
Two final questions for you to respond to and finish off this podcast, Ben. One, you talked about how the bench unit of the 76ers is not as impressive as it is the starting lineup, but they were still commendable, I guess, especially Boban Marjanovic. That's the main guy there, because coming off the bench also Mike Scott, but Boban especially, 7'3", 7'4". He's huge. Our biggest guy coming off the bench that we're going to play, Serge Ibaka, 6'10". Do you expect that the Raptors can respond well to a big lineup, right? Because usually we're used to in the NBA teams playing small ball, and that's a challenge to match up to defensively, but the Raptors are fantastic at that. Can the Raptors match up to the 76ers big ball? That's question one. And question two, how many games is this series going to go?
Whew. Okay, the second one's a hot question, but to your point on big lineups, the Sixers bench, they play about four guys really a lot of minutes off the bench: Boban, James Ennis, Mike Scott, and Moose. Greg Monroe, he's been getting about 10 minutes per game in the first round, and TJ McConnell gets about 10 minutes per game, but the rest of them don't get too much run. So they have about four guys that are all pretty big. So to your point, they're going to run some big lineups off the bench, and Serge Ibaka does a very good job at handling these bigger defenders, despite the fact he's a natural power forward but a center in today's NBA. But I think that kind of plays better in the modern NBA to the Toronto Raptors. When you have such big players on the court, they can kind of be, for what they make up in, rebounding and finishing down low, they kind of take away in terms of perimeter defense and being able to play in transition, and that's where the Raptors, at least bench, definitely thrives, right? We see Pascal Siakam running with Fred VanVleet and Norm. They love to get out and run, because Siakam's run with the bench a lot. So I think we could maybe take advantage of that bigger lineup, but defensive rebound is going to be key. Boban is known for just getting a ton of offensive rebounds for the Sixers, so he's going to be someone the Raptors need to be shut down. Marc Gasol might get some extended run in the series, having to deal with Joel Embiid and Boban, and obviously Greg Monroe is on this team. He's going to come out motivated. We know how former Toronto Raptors like to play against the Raptors, so he might come out and surprise some people in this series. As for my prediction for the games, people got mad at us, Ryker, when we said sweep. They got mad.
Yeah.
So did. I'm not going to call sweep again. I'm not. But if we win game one, I'm saying 5.
Wow.
I'm confident.
I'm
confident in this team. In getting out here, I love the way Kawhi, beside from game one of the Orlando series, we looked like an absolute monstrous team in the first round. I think if we play like that for this full series, there's going to be some close games. It's going to be a tough series, but I'm very optimistic. People that listen to the podcast know I'm a Raptors homer when it comes to my predictions, but I think 5 games is possible.
I'm going Raptors in 7. I like your Raptors in 5 better, though. I like the optimism.
Gotta win it on home court.
I could see them losing 1 on home court and 1 on the road. I could see them winning Game 7 at home. Obviously, that's what I'm sort of predicting, the way that everything transpires. But like I said, hopefully you're right with the Game 5 or the 5 game total to win it all. And other than that, I think we've covered everything. If everybody stuck along this long, that's pretty impressive. But there is a lot to unpack here with this 76ers matchup. And this one will be so much more fun, Ben, than the Orlando Magic. Nothing against the Magic, but they're just not that exciting. This one is a real test to everything that the Raptors have been working towards. And I am so excited to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, hopefully we can come out and dominate and put the league on notice. People are rooting for, you mentioned at the beginning, it's weird to see media talk about the Toronto Raptors as favorites. I've never been in this position before as a Raptors fan, so it's super interesting to see. But let us know what you guys think about the Raptors. What's your predictions for the series? Let us know in the comment section below. Check us out on all platforms. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. Stance giveaways for people that saw our Instagram post. We have a lot of cool stuff coming there. Ryker, any last words on this series?
Like I said, it's gonna be good. That's it. Cheers.